Hello everyone, Rich Hagan, Brian David Marshall, BDM, Pro Tour historian. Magic lives in the world of the extraordinary, the fantastic, the sublime, the incredible, the mythic, the unimaginable. Everything I've just said applied today in this building.
I don't remember ever seeing anything like Seth Manfield's run at this tournament. He went 15-1 over 16 rounds to become the Magic the Gathering World Champion for this year. Just an unbelievable performance, just dominated draft, was a powerhouse and constructed both formats, and just, picked up one loss, just knocked out, former world champions, knocked out players of the years along the way. Just a dominant performance by someone that, when you did your sort of, fantasy draft of the top 4 or 5 players in the room, was not someone that I think a lot of people penciled in at the top of the 24 players who were playing in this event.
Yeah, a sleeper pick, if you will. And let's be honest, we had 24 of the best players in the world. Of course, we were going to get great Magic. Of course, we were going to see very intricate little edges here and there. And today, once we got down to our final 4, we knew we were going to get great stories no matter what. Why don't we get to the big board and show you what actually came about here on the final day of the Magic the Gathering World Championship. Now, we did begin with Seth Manfield, his Abzan control deck, against what was pretty much the most interesting deck of the 4, White Devotion. In a not shocking turn of events, that most interesting deck in the top 4 was piloted by Sam Black.
Yeah, this was one of the most interesting decks. It was a White Devotion deck. It was playing all sorts of really interesting cards. It was playing Nykthos, trying to Nyx. It was really interesting, but it was not very good against Abzan. Somebody earlier in the day joked, Sam Black has a better chance of being next year's world champion than he does this year's world champion, having to get through 2 Abzan decks if he wants to make it through.
Right. Now, Sam's an utter professional, and I'm sure that he will not care in the least whether he lost 3-0 or 3-1. Nonetheless, I think it is great that somewhere in that 4-game quasi-massacre, there was that one game where Sam got to it. This is what my deck does. It is for real. Smash. And, I mean, he got a game off Seth Manfield.
Yeah,
Who does that?
No, barely anyone. Worth noting that the deck was that Craig Wesco played last weekend at the WMCQ and got to the top 8 of the first U.S. wave of WMCQs.
So that meant that in semi-final 1, Seth Manfield advanced to the finals. Who would he face? Well, it was going to be Abzan of some flavour, but would it be Paul Rietzl with Hangerback Abzan, or would it be Owen Turtenwald, the number 2 seed with Abzan control?
Again, this was, if you talk to Owen, he thought Paul was a favorite. If you talk to Paul, he thought Owen was the favorite. It just, neither side thought that they had a heavy edge, and that really talks to how close these Abzan quasi-mirrors are, because there are some pretty different cards, and Paul's able to get in under Owen, but Owen is able to sweep the board and take more control of the game, and that's pretty much how it played out for Owen.
Yeah, as Louis Scott Vargas said to us off air, in fact, just before that semi-final, said the thing is, if you're going to be quicker than your opponent, you want to be a lot quicker than your opponent. And Paul Rietzl's deck was just a smidge quicker.
Right, because if you squint, you can't tell the difference between the 2 decks.
Right.
So he can't be that much quicker because he still has a 6-drop Elspeth and 4-drop Siege Rhinos and all that kind of stuff in his deck. So it was Owen Turtenwald who advanced to the finals there.
That's right. And so in the end, you had the top 2 pace setters. Now, they weren't created equal because, let's be honest, Owen Turtenwald ended up with a 9-5 record, which is utterly excellent. But Manfield was the story of the weekend all the way through. And in a way, that gave you the danger signal, because coming into today, 13-1, he's at 0-0.
It reminded everybody of Shota Yasaoka's run from the Players' Championship, which would eventually become part of this World Championship. It was the first tournament in this series 4 events ago, where he just went on a tear through the field, only to run, afoul of a Player of the Year in the finals in Yuya Watanabe. Well, Player of the Year, Owen Turtenwald in the finals. But you know what? This has been an amazing year for Seth Manfield, a big life-changing year in a lot of ways. His huge season, he got here on an at-large berth, meaning he just had this remarkably consistent season. He was platinum. started with a Grand Prix win at Grand Prix Ottawa. He'd been playing the whole year, but like this was where everything really started to fire for him. And you know what? That was only a couple days after he found out that his girlfriend was pregnant with his first child.
Yeah.
And so, he's spent this whole year knowing this sort of looming responsibility that he was going to be a dad, and that his life was going to change. And you know what? His performance has changed. Perhaps, I don't know if he, just whether it's the sort of whims of fate or him just buckling down and taking the game more seriously. This is someone who's been able to win Grand Prix, but has kind of dabbled as a pro over the years, really buckled down and, put up the results. He's got a Pro Tour top 8 this season. He's got the Grand Prix win this season. And now, facing Owen Turtenwald in a 5-game set.
And you say a 5-game set, sometimes you can't help it. It's just sport, which means that sooner or later, you just have a 3-0, you don't get the right lands. And we just kind of go, well, a brilliant weekend, and we slightly gloss over the fact that it
well done
out,
by.
Well, yes, lovely. Good final, good job. Not this time. Oh, my word. Back and forth we went. 3 games. Owen Turtenwald's in the lead. He's 2-1 up. And the storyline is that this man who has absolutely devoted himself to the game to become world champion is 1 game away. And all these 13, 14 wins, they're not worthless, but boy, they feel worthless when you're 2-1 down in the final.
You know what? And the first couple of games in the finals were both kind of like halting affairs. Owen starts off with a 2 Thoughtseize 5-land hand and just kind of floods out. Seth Manfield gets stuck on land. Things and then things even out, and we get to that 5th game, and Owen Turtenwald keeps a 6-card hand. Mm-hmm. He mulligans, and he keeps a 6-card hand with Thoughtseize and 5 lands. And you're like, oh no, we're not going to get a great game here. But, we're using the new mulligan rule.
Mm-hmm.
Owen gets to scry once he decides to keep that 6-card hand, sees a Read the Bones on top. And suddenly, we had a game.
Oh, and we have a game?
A game for the ages. It was an amazing game. Went back and forth. Seth was definitely on the front foot through most of it, but Owen fought back valiantly. There was multiple planeswalkers resolved on both sides of the table.
The thing is,
multiple siege rhinos.
Yeah, but Owen was not at 1, but at a virtual 1 for turn after turn, and then gets to put Ugin the Spirit Dragon into play, and suddenly Ugin's at 9, and you're thinking, can he actually just sit on 1 forever and ever and ever, amen, and come out the other side?
Unfortunately, he was not, but fortunately for Seth Manfield, he was not, and Seth Manfield is our world champion. And what an amazing moment that was to see Seth Manfield's reaction to, realizing that I just went 15, like if you just said, like you were going to sign on to Magic Online and you were going to play for 2 days and you were going to be like, I went 15-1, most of us would be like talking about that 2 years from now. Yep. He went 15-1 at the World Championships, beating Owen Turtenwald 3 times, beating Yuya Watanabe twice, basically beating everybody who came his way. Just an unbelievable weekend by the young man.
It was. We want to thank each and every one of you for being part of our Worlds Weekend. Remember, PAX here in Seattle goes on and on through the rest of Sunday and all day tomorrow, Monday. But our World Championship story is at an end. We all love the game for so many different reasons. We've had hundreds of cosplayers here this weekend. We have had hundreds and hundreds of people learning to play their very, very first Duel of Magic. Just out beyond that camera right now, maybe the 2038 world champion has just tapped their first island.
You assume it's an island?
If they want to be a world champion. But if you want to know what Magic really, really means, why we all keep coming back, we'll leave you with this.